Perfect. So this is going to be a quick demo tutorial on how to animate in Maya with the principles of animation in mind, specifically timing and spacing. So this is going to be the pendulum exercise. I'm going to, again, create a reference for my rig. Going to select the ultimate pendulum, wherever it is in your space, make sure you find it. Okay. Now that I have my pendulum in place, I'm going to zoom out. And just like any animation rig that I touch, I want to make sure that I'm not touching the geometry. And if you can see, the geometry is showing on the rig. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to go over to Show. I'm going to hide the nerd curves so I don't see them. That way I can select all of the geometry. And look, we have 3 pieces of geometry. To put simple, what I'm going to do is go over to the outliner side on the far right. I'm going to click on my channel box, and I'm going to scroll down to Display tab where my layers are. Again, make sure the geometry you want in a layer is selected. You're going to the far right side, the tab that says Create a New Layer and Assign Selected Objects. Click on that. Now that I have my new layer, I'm going to press the V button to make sure that everything that I want is inside the layer. Perfect. So now that I know all of my geometry is inside this layer, I'm going to double click the layer. I'm going to call this layer Geo for short, geometry. Save that. Now I'm going to go into the far right box right before Geo and keep clicking that until it says R for reference. With R, I cannot touch any of this geometry even if I wanted to. So now that I can animate with confidence and knowing that I will not be touching the geometry, I'm going to go back to Show, and I'm going to click on my NURB curves. Perfect. Now, as I mentioned before, as you start getting into more advanced rigs, you're going to be introduced to a root controller. You do not want to animate or move this root controller. Please keep it in place. I will go into more detail about why we do that, but for now, all you need to know is that this root controller does not get touched. Now that I have everything ready to animate, I'm going to animate using only my main controller first, because this is where the core of my movement is going to be. I'm not going to touch this yet. So I'm going to move my main controller where I want. I'm going to now set that key by pressing the S key. Actually, before I do that, I'm going to my settings by clicking the little orange person at the very bottom. I'm going into categories and I'm clicking on animation. Make sure in your animation preferences, when you go down to tangents, it says weighted tangents and default tangent weight. For default in tangent, I'm selecting flat. And for default out tangent, I'm selecting stepped. This is going to be the closest to 2D animation. If you're sincerely interested in animation, I highly recommend animating this way starting out. The reason being is because it's going to force your eye to think about arcs, overlapping action, timing and spacing especially. But please keep in mind, when you're animating flat and stepped, it's going to force you to develop your eye for animation a lot better than if you were to animate in auto span. So I'm going to save those settings. Now that I have those settings, when I press S on my first key, and if I go down the line to say frame 28, when I play in between, it does not animate in between for me, which is what I want. I do not want Maya to animate for me. I want to tell Maya what I want to animate. So now that I have that, I am going to ease in to my endpoint. To do that and make it easier on myself, I'm going to create an editable motion trail. So you're going to click on Visualize at the very top. You're going to click the box right next to Create Editable Motion Trail. Now you're going to get a box that says Motion Trail Options. Your start time should be 1 frame. If it ends up being a different frame, you're more than welcome to put that. For my end time, I want this to end at 47 frames. So I'm going to put 47 on end time. And I'm going to click at the very bottom, Show Frame Numbers. And that will show me what frame number is on each keyframe. So I'm going to go ahead and create that editable motion trail. You can see my trail here. Now, again, now that I have my 2 keyframes set, I am now going to begin in-betweening my animation. So my next second frame should only move a little bit because, again, I'm easing into the movement. Now that I have that, I'm going to move it further down on frame 3. And each frame I'm picking up speed. So I'm moving the spacing further apart. Until finally I get to frame 28. So I'm just going to literally go down the animation, and at a certain point my timing is going to be about the same. Because I'm maintaining speed. And at a certain point, I know this timing is going to be completely off. That's okay, because I can always change the timing of my animation. No problem. So as you can see, I obviously ran out of frames. So what I'm going to do is, I'm just going to gently move these frames down. Select all of them at once, which is one of the cool things about working with the editable motion trail, is I can move all of these frames at once if I so choose. Okay, further move this back. And I'm going to keep doing this until I get a better feeling for my animation. Perfect. And we'll set those frames closer together. So now that you have the idea of what I'm doing, I am just going to go through and add some more frames. Can't forget frame 13. Perfect. Got that there. And honestly, an easier way to do this is to select your actual keyframe. So if I were to actually do this, cut this all out. So by frame 7, I want to be at this point. By frame 18, I want to be at this point. And then I'll slow down a little bit when I get to frame 23. And then I'll ease into that stop. But I'll make it a little bit more abrupt. Okay, so now that I have my keyframe set, actually, yeah, this is how I would prefer to animate. Having a specific spot where you want to land your frames, and then you can change the timing of your keyframes as a result. So I'm going to key all of my possible controllers on frame 1. By frame 7, again, this should automatically start to do this. I kind of like having it tilted a little bit, so I'm going to keep that, the disc as well. So by there, it should be like that. This should be picking up speed, so I'm going to have that lift up a little bit. Perfect. Frame 23, this should be maintained. By the time it stops, I should be at least towards the middle. And then after a few or a couple frames, I'm going to have that there. So now when I play this, again, your keyframe should be so good that when you're viewing your keyframes, it just looks like a choppy animation. There you go. Perfect. So now that I have that set, I'm going to again select these controllers. I'm going to move them again. Give about 3 frames. Okay. After looking at this, you know, it feels a little bit too much. So I'm going to dial that back. Again, don't be afraid to feel the animation. Okay, I'm going to select these controllers again. Perfect. Sorry. Slack. Okay, I'm going to dial that back just a little bit more. And then I want to say by frame 40, I'll be back at center. So now when I play this, perfect. So now I have all my keyframes set. All the spacing is right to me. However, what I want to do is work on the timing. So if I play this out, it feels like it's slowing in and speeding up. So I think my timing is okay, but worst case scenario, if not, no worries. Let's see, by frame 3. So between frame 1 and 7, I want to speed up a little bit. So this is going to be my in-between. I'm not going to be exactly like halfway, because again, if I make it halfway, then that spacing is just, it's too samey. I don't want my spacing to be samey. So I'm going to go to frame 3. And right here, I'm going to give myself a little in between. Sorry, that's frame 4. Frame 3. Give myself a little in between. Remember, I don't want the curve of the pendulum to quite match this. It's going to be less than this because I'm picking up speed. Okay. I'm a little concerned about the timing on frame 18, but we'll see what happens when we play it out. Okay, that feels pretty good. So now at this point, this is actually one of the easier exercises. I could, if I wanted to, go into auto tangent just to see what this would look like. So I'm going to do that now. I'm going to go in the outliner. I'm going to hide the motion trail. I'm going to hide the NURB curves, so I only see the animation. And now what I'm going to do is, actually no, open up the NURB curves again. Sorry. And I'm going to auto tangent these right here. Auto tangents legacy. And so now you can see in my graph editor that the tangents have automatically worked for me. So now when I play this, Perfect. Okay, so I could see it, and now that I have it in auto tangent, you can feel it. It's super slow, and then it speeds up all of a sudden. So to change that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to select my curves. Because I have all of my keyframes keyed, all the controllers are keyed, I can move around my keyframes so that I have a much better sense of where things are going in space. So, and time as well. So everything's selected. I'm going to automatically auto tangent. So now all my keys are set. This feels like it takes way too long to get into frame 18. So what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to make my timing faster by moving the keys forward in space. This is going to be even faster. So you see that even though I said I was going to be on frame 47, again, I'm playing with the timing and the spacing. See how much better that feels now? So don't be afraid to play with the timing and spacing. Again, just a quick demonstration of how I did that. So I'm going to frame 18. And I don't like that it's so far out. It's taking too long to get to frame 18. So to combat that, I'm going to hold down Shift. I'm going to click my keyframe. I am going to select, again, while holding down Shift, holding down Shift, I'm going to select all of the keyframes that I have after it. In the very middle, right here, are these little yellow arrows. I'm going to move it back. And I want to say that frame 12 or 13 is going to feel better. Let's find out. So I select out of that. And now when I play it, yes, timing feels way better. Now, if you look here, it feels a little slow towards the end. So I'm going to play with the timing of that. Again, you can only do this if you made sure that every controller is keyed. This is why it's so much easier to play around with keyframes. If everything's keyed, you can move everything and it's not going to ruin your animation. Let me show you what will happen if you do not key everything. Let's just say hypothetically I were to delete some of these keyframes here. See, it makes the animation a little wonky. I've lost some of that bounce and buoyancy. And even worse, look what happens when I move the motion, the main controller. Look what happens if I were to do this instead. Let's say I move everything, but I forgot to key the pendulums. Watch what happens. Weird stuff. I lose that oomph because it's not working with me. So make sure that all of your keys are set on your controllers so that you can mess around with them. Okay, let's put all those keys back. Perfect. Okay, now remember, anytime you're changing the timing, make sure that all of your controllers are selected. If you do not do this, you will only change one of them. So let's say, for instance, I select the bottom pendulum. Look what happens if I accidentally just move that one. Let's move it back. See what happens. It just looks weird at the beginning. It's broken. So to avoid that, make sure that all of your keys are selected. Okay, so that's honestly the main thing I wanted to cover for this exercise. The next thing I would do is I would save. So I've blocked out my animation. It looks good in auto tangent. Now what I'm going to do is save scene as. Save it wherever you want. I'm going to put it in my personal folder. You probably can't see it in this video because the recording only records Maya. But just know I'm putting the pendulum in my work files folder. I am going to change it to Maya ASCII. And for your naming conventions for this assignment, again, I'm going to call it first name, Rudy Solorzano. last name, underscore pendulum. This is the third iteration that I've done, so I'm going to name it pendulum 003 and save. So now that I've done that, I am going to do what I call cleanup. I'm going to go into my graph editor, and I'm just going to look at what I do and don't need. So I'm not moving on the y-axis, so I can just delete that. For the translate x, let's see. It looks like if I got rid of this, it'd be smoother. So let's see what happens if I were to delete the translate z in the graph editor. Okay, see, look, my timing is even smoother now. So the cleanup portion of my workflow helps with timing as well, because this is when Maya is cleaning up the animation that I was trying to convey. That's when I'm okay with Maya animating for me, when Maya can interpolate better than I can. So for this one, frame 3 is not looking very good. So I'm going to delete frame 3. That looks like a drastic change. Let's see if it's for the better or the worse. It actually looks smoother now. So if worst case scenario, I still wanted this frame, and I did not like how deleting it changed it, I'll actually just move the frame in the actual graph editor. So let's see right here. It's got this weird curve to it. So I'm just going to lower it down a little bit, so it gets smoothed out. And already that looks like a better curve. So if I were to play this now, it looks smoother. Same thing with this one right here. Let's see if I even need this frame. I think I do, so I'm going to leave it there. Let's just see what happens when I delete it. It's not a huge difference. Actually, no, I think I like that more. Yeah, that does look smoother. Okay, so just so you all know, what I'm doing right now is I'm literally just going into each controller from the main down, and I'm just cleaning up my animation. So this could be smoothed out. That looks better. Okay, that one's good. Let's see about this one. Same thing with this one. This could be smoothed out a little bit. Perfect. And last but not least, the bottom one. Yes, this frame could be smoothed out as well. So it looks a little awkward. So that's me cleaning up. And now that the animation is looking cleaner, I feel pretty comfortable posting this right now. So I'm going to go and close all of this extra stuff in the background by clicking on Show. I'm going to click Controllers under Show. I'm going to click NURB Curves. NURB Curves will get rid of your controllers, actually. Sorry, not controllers. Click that one back on. So NURB Curves gets rid of your controllers. If you go on Show, you can click Grid towards the bottom, and that'll get rid of the grid. You can also click right under Show, and that'll reopen and close your grid. Next thing you can do is click on Show and click on the HUD display, which is the heads-up display. Clicking that will eliminate everything in your viewport that is part of the HUD display. Next, I already did this in the last exercise, but I'll do it again so you can all see. I'm going to click on Rendering for my Play Blast settings. Before you Play Blast, make sure you go to Rendering. The reason I personally go to Rendering is in case I want to render this assignment at some point in time, my settings are already made. So I'm going to click on Render, Render Settings. In Render Settings, right now I'm on Maya software. Usually I have the other rendering software, but for the sake of demonstration, all you need to know is that as long as your camera and your image size is set, that is the most important thing. So image format, you could literally put PSD and it's not going to matter, but I'm going to put AVI just for safety. End frame, so start frame is 1. My end frame, let's look at my end frame. We'll say that my end frame is on 40, so that I have a little bit more time for you to process the stop. Now, the camera view. Which camera view am I using? Well, all you have to do is click on Show, put on your HUD display again, and look, at the very bottom, it'll tell you, okay, I'm using the left camera. So instead of the perspective camera, I'm going to use the left camera. That way I'm rendering from the left. For your image size, I like 720, especially for uploading the Sync Sketch. It's a much smaller file size. Perfect, it's on 720. That's good, so I'm going to close that. I'm going to close my HUD display again, so I'm only animating or witnessing this. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to click on animation instead of rendering. And that's going to open up the playback tab. I'm going to click on that. Now, if you cannot see this, that's okay, no problem. You can go on the timeline, and at the very bottom is Play Blast. You're going to click the box right next to Play Blast. Next thing you're going to do is, if you're working in Windows, you're going to select AVI. Encoding, don't have to worry about that. If you have Mac, you may have QT instead. If that's the case, click on QT. For encoding, you're going to select H.263. But worst case scenario, just make sure that you don't click on image. Whatever option there is, just don't click on image. Otherwise, if you do image, it'll give you a bunch of images or a GIF. You don't want that. So we're going to select AVI. Quality, if your file size is too big, do not make it 100. You can reduce it down to 60, but I would say no lower than 60. I'm going to set mine to 100. Display size from render settings. Do not click from window. Make sure you select from render settings. And that will be the settings that I've just made in the render settings. So scale, make sure it's 100 or 1. Now, make sure you click on Save to File. If you do not click Save to File, your Play Blast will get sent to some file in the ether. I do not want that. Make sure you select Save to File. Browse where you want your file to go. I probably can't see this right now, but I'm opening up my save file location. I have a file called Pendulum, and in my Pendulum file I have something called Work Files. I'm going to click on that, and I'm just going to call this again, naming conventions, Rudy Solorzano, first and last name, underscore, name of the assignment, Pendulum, and then I'm going to put 00, and whatever iteration this is my first Play Blast, so it's going to be Rudy Solorzano underscore pendulum underscore 001. Save that in my file. And now that my file location has been set and it's saved to file, I can now Play Blast with comfort. So now when I Play Blast this animation, boom. And as you can see, I was using the step model. It looks the same, if not, in my opinion, better, because I'm telling Maya exactly what I want. So hopefully that's of help to everyone. I'm going to stop the recording, but thank you for watching. I appreciate it. And yeah.